The winter of 1943 blanketed Germany in frost and silence, but beneath the snow, a storm was growing. The cities above were battered and weary, but deep underground, the Third Reich poured resources, ingenuity, and terror into building weapons that defied imagination. Hitler, obsessed with reversing the tide of war, believed that these Wunderwaffe, miracle weapons, could turn defeat into victory. He summoned his top engineers and scientists to the Wolf's Lair, demanding not incremental improvements, but inventions so powerful they would shock the world. Hitler leaned over the long oak table, blueprints scattered in front of him. "The enemy grows stronger every day," he warned, his eyes burning. "I want weapons that are faster, bigger, deadlier. You will deliver miracles or face the consequences." Among those present was Werner von Braun, a young rocket scientist whose mind teetered between genius and obsession. He had already delivered the V2 rocket, a weapon that terrorized London. But now, Hitler demanded more. Faster rockets, longer ranges, and innovations that will leave them shocked, the Führer said, tapping a finger on a crude sketch of a missile. Von Braun whispered to his assistant Klaus, "We are racing against ourselves. Every day the Allies advance, and every delay costs lives." Klaus nodded, the cold concrete walls echoing their fear. "I fear what he will do if we fail," he replied, voice low. Nearby, Luftwaffe engineer Hans Hornung spread out plans for the world's first operational jet fighter. Its sleek design looked almost alien, with engines unlike anything in current aviation. "The Me-262 will change aerial combat forever," Hornung said. "But production, that is the challenge," a colonel interrupted, exasperated. "We need these machines now. The Allies are closing in on the Reich. Every day counts." Hornung sighed. "We can build it, but the timelines are impossible. These pilots will be shocked when they see how little training they will have before flying them into combat." Beneath the Harz Mountains, forced laborers dug endlessly, carving tunnels that would become the Mittelwerk complex. The air was damp and choking, the walls echoing the clatter of pickaxes. Here, massive V2 rockets were assembled. Here, experimental bombers were tested. Here, unimaginable machines took shape in shadows, far from Allied eyes. One engineer, Ernst, wiped soot from his brow. "I cannot believe the scale of what we are building," he muttered. "If this succeeds, it could destroy entire cities." A fellow worker, Karl, shook his head. "I am shocked we are even attempting it. The resources, the manpower, it's insanity." Hitler's obsession did not stop with rockets or jets. He demanded heavier tanks, massive artillery, and even electromagnetic experiments that scientists struggled to comprehend. The schematics for the Maus tank, a colossal 188-ton vehicle, lay on a table in Peenemünde. "The Allies will be shocked when this rolls onto the battlefield," a general said, staring at the drawings. But the reality of war meant delays, sabotage, and exhaustion. The engineers were trapped between ambition and terror. Failures were punished. Mistakes could cost their lives. In Peenemünde, one failed test of a rocket sent debris raining down on the test site. Von Braun watched silently as the assistants scrambled. "History will remember the results, not the failures," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Across the Atlantic, Allied intelligence intercepted reports of strange test activity. Radar readings showed unusual rocket signatures. Intercepts suggested experimental aircraft. In London, analysts whispered in astonishment, "The Germans are building something shocking." Meanwhile, back in Germany, Hitler's impatience grew. Meetings became harsher, arguments sharper. "You will not fail me," he barked during one assembly. "I have been patient. No longer. The world will be shocked by our power." Von Braun exchanged a look with Hornung. Both men understood the stakes. Success could shift the war. Failure could destroy them. Yet in the tunnels, workshops, and bunkers, work continued, driven by fear, ambition, and so the secret weapons program surged forward, underground, invisible, and terrifying. Men worked, slept, and dreamed within steel and concrete. Some believed in the mission. Others were simply trying to survive. The Allies would soon discover what the Reich had hidden, and they would be shocked. Beneath the forests and mountains of Germany, other secret projects began to take shape. Engineers experimented with massive jet-powered bombers, strange-looking gliders, and even rocket-assisted ground vehicles. Each design pushed the limits of physics and human endurance. In one underground lab, Dr. Friedrich Weber examined a blueprint for a vertical takeoff aircraft. "If this works, it will shock the Allies," he said, his fingers tracing the jagged lines on the paper. "But the mechanics, they are beyond anything we've done before." His assistant, Liesel, shivered in the cold concrete chamber. "I am shocked we are even testing this now, with the front collapsing everywhere else," she whispered. "Do you think it can actually fly?" Dr. Weber's gaze hardened. "It must fly. Hitler will not accept failure, and if it crashes, well, we both know what that means." At the same time, engineers worked feverishly on gigantic artillery pieces. The Schwerer Gustav, a 1350-ton railgun, was designed to obliterate fortresses from miles away. When the first prototype was rolled out for testing, a German officer exclaimed, "The Allies will be shocked when they see this fire." In Peenemünde, von Braun's V-2 rockets were being refined with deadly precision. They were crude by modern standards, yet the psychological effect was devastating. One technician remarked, "When London feels these bombs, the world will be shocked, not just by destruction, but by how we made this possible." Meanwhile, intelligence reports trickled back to Allied command. MI6 analysts stared at the intercepted communications. "They are building something no one can truly comprehend," said one officer, shaking his head. "If these reports are accurate, we are in for a shock the likes of which we cannot imagine." The scientists and engineers were trapped in a paradox, creating weapons beyond comprehension while living under the constant threat of death if they failed. Each day, Hitler visited the sites, inspecting blueprints, engines, and models. His presence filled the rooms with fear and urgency. "Do not disappoint me," he warned. "The world will be shocked by what we are about to unleash." Even as men labored underground, questions of morality whispered through the halls. Some feared the consequences of these monstrous inventions. Von Braun, haunted by visions of cities reduced to rubble, muttered quietly to himself, "I never imagined our work would shock the world in such a deadly way." Yet he pushed on, torn between duty, fear, and ambition. And as winter turned to spring, more Wunderwaffe emerged: rockets, jets, artillery, and tanks. Each new machine promised to shock the world, but time was running out. The Allies advanced relentlessly. Germany's resources dwindled. And still, deep underground, the Reich continued to build what it believed could save them from collapse. By mid-1944, Germany's secret weapons program had reached a fever pitch. In the underground bunkers of Peenemünde and Mittelwerk, engineers and scientists labored tirelessly, often collapsing from exhaustion before dawn. Hitler believed these Wunderwaffe, miracle weapons, could shock the world and reverse the tide of the war. For the men and women building them, each day was a struggle between ingenuity, fear, and the awareness that failure could mean death. In one dimly lit workshop, von Braun oversaw the assembly of a V-2 rocket. Sparks flew from welding machines, filling the air with acrid smoke. "If this launches successfully, London will know terror as never before," he said to Klaus, adjusting a stabilizer. Klaus shivered. "I am shocked we are still pushing forward while Allied bombers circle above us nightly." Von Braun tightened a bolt without answering immediately. "This is history," he muttered. "The world will be shocked by what we are about to release. Whether rightly or wrongly, it will change everything." Elsewhere, in the experimental aircraft labs, Hans Hornung inspected a prototype Me-262 jet fighter. Its engines roared briefly as technicians tested thrust. Erika, his assistant, looked worried. "Do you think pilots are ready for this speed?" Hornung shook his head. "They will be shocked. These planes fly faster than anything the Allies have. But without proper training, few will survive their first missions." Outside the bunkers, Allied reconnaissance began to uncover outlines of the Wunderwaffe program. Captain James Llewellyn, a British operative, reviewed aerial photographs. "It's worse than we imagined," he said. "They are building machines that will shock the world if deployed." Deep underground, another division experimented with electromagnetic weapons and other exotic technologies. Dr. Friedrich Weber monitored a magnetic coil, eyes wide with shock. "If this works, it could disable entire fleets of Allied ships," he said. Liesel, his assistant, clenched her fists. "I am shocked anyone thinks this will function in combat. The science is untested." Hitler grew increasingly impatient. He demanded daily reports from Peenemünde. "You are shocking me with delays," he shouted. "Every day we waste is a day the Allies gain ground. Deliver miracles." In Berlin, generals debated strategy over massive maps. General Erhard, pointing to schematics of the Schwere Gustav, said, "Once this artillery is deployed, the Soviets will be shocked. No fortress can withstand its power." Yet shortages and sabotage slowed progress. Allied bombings disrupted transport. Forced labourers risked everything to sabotage. Designs. Karl, a labourer, whispered to a colleague while loosening bolts on a tank prototype. If the Allies knew the full extent, they would be shocked and horrified. But here we are, making history anyway. In northern Germany, small experimental units tested rocket-assisted vehicles. Night fell, and engineers lit torches to illuminate steel frames. Engineer Ernst checked gauges. If this fails, the pilot will be shocked, and so will everyone watching. Allied analysts intercepted V-2 test flights. MI6 officer Claire Sutton shook her head. "They are building something unimaginable. The world will be shocked when these hit cities," she said. Von Braun debated with his team. "We cannot delay, but we must be precise," he said. "Each test failure shocks morale. Each success increases fear and responsibility. I am constantly shocked by the weight of what we are doing." Hornung's team continued jet testing. A prototype roared down the runway, taking off into the sky. Engineers and officers watched, jaws tight. "They will be shocked when these enter combat," Hornung said. Deep in Mittelwerk, a small explosion rocked the assembly line. Workers coughed, screaming in panic. Otto, a foreman, yelled, "Stay calm! Do not let the explosion shock you into panic!" Von Braun stood in silence. Every day, someone dies, someone survives, and every failure shocks us into action. "This is the cost of miracles," he whispered to Klaus. Around the Reich's underground complexes, morality, survival, and ambition intertwined. Men laboured, aware that their creations would shock the world in ways no one could predict. Meanwhile, the first rockets were readied for combat. The Me-262 jets and massive artillery pieces were transported cautiously, often under cover of darkness. Hitler visited the sites, pacing and shouting, "Soon, the Allies will be shocked by the might of Germany. Deliver perfection." The world outside remained unaware of the scale of Germany's secret program. Allied intelligence pieced together fragments, yet even top analysts were shocked by the audacity of the Reich's ambitions. Captain Llewellyn studied blueprints from reconnaissance. They have weapons we cannot imagine. If deployed, they could shock nations, terrorize cities, and delay the inevitable. Back underground, von Braun and Hornung watched as a V-2 rocket was fueled for a test launch. "Everyone be ready," von Braun said. "If this succeeds, the world will be shocked at what humans can create and destroy." Erika, gripping the edge of the observation platform, whispered to Hornung, "I am shocked at the power we are unleashing. Can anyone survive it?" Hornung did not answer. He only stared as the countdown began, smoke and sparks filling the tunnel. Outside, war raged. Inside, fear, ambition, and science collided, creating weapons that would shock the world for decades. By late 1944, the Reich was nearing the final stages of deploying its secret weapons. The V-2 rockets had begun targeting London. Me-262 jets roared across the skies, and massive artillery like the Schwerer Gustav was aimed at Soviet fortresses. Hitler believed these Wunderwaffe would shock the Allies, potentially turning the tide of the war. For the soldiers and civilians below, the first glimpses of these weapons would be terrifying. In Peenemünde, von Braun oversaw a V-2 test launch. "All systems nominal," he announced. Klaus, standing nearby, swallowed hard. "I am shocked at how real this is. Soon it will leave the tunnels and strike cities." Von Braun's assistant, Otto, nodded. "We've done everything we can. What happens next is out of our hands." The countdown began. Sparks flew, engines roared, and the rocket ascended in a trail of fire and smoke. Everyone in the control room held their breath. When the rocket arced and struck a distant target, a collective gasp filled the chamber. Von Braun muttered, "They will be shocked. The Allies will not know what hit them." In London, air raid sirens blared for the first time as reports of a new type of weapon reached intelligence offices. MI6 officer Claire Sutton reviewed intercepted communications. "These rockets, they're unlike anything we've seen," she said. "The world will be shocked." Across the channel, pilots in the RAF scrambled to intercept Me-262 jets. One young pilot, Flight Lieutenant James Carter, radioed, "I am shocked at their speed. These machines are incredible, almost impossible to shoot down." Hornung watched from Germany as another jet test took off. Erika beside him whispered, "The world will be shocked when they fly into combat. I just hope our own pilots survive this." Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hitler paced furiously. "The Allies will be shocked," he shouted to generals. "Do not let them underestimate us. These weapons will save the Reich." However, the deployment of these Wunderwaffe was not as smooth as Hitler imagined. Allied bombings, sabotaged infrastructure, and shortages slowed production. Workers whispered about their fears. Karl, a labourer, said to a colleague, "I am shocked. They think we can really turn the war around with these machines. The front is collapsing above us." On the Eastern Front, the Schwerer Gustav artillery was finally deployed. Its first shells struck distant fortifications with terrifying accuracy. General Erhard, observing from a command post, said, "They will be shocked by the destruction, but this will not last long. We cannot replace these weapons quickly enough." Back in London, civilians felt the terror of the V-2 attacks. Buildings crumbled, and thousands fled for safety. Claire Sutton and her team analysed impact reports. We are shocked by both the devastation and the speed with which these rockets travel. There is nothing we can do to intercept them, she admitted. In Germany, engineers continued to push the limits. Dr. Weber and Liesel tested new experimental devices, from electromagnetic coils to rocket-assisted gliders. If these work, Weber said, they will shock the enemy, and possibly ourselves. Hornung's Me-262 jets began entering combat, astonishing the Allies. Flight Lieutenant Carter reported again, "I am shocked by their maneuverability. Our tactics barely work against them." Despite these technological marvels, Germany's strategic situation was deteriorating. Allied advances on multiple fronts, combined with the strain of war, meant that even the Wunderwaffe could not compensate. Yet Hitler refused to relent. He summoned von Braun and Hornung to Berlin. Hitler barked, "The world must be shocked. These weapons will save us. Fail, and the Reich dies." Von Braun, exhausted, replied quietly, "We are doing everything possible, my Führer, but time is not on our side." Hornung added, "The pilots and engineers are doing their utmost. We will shock the enemy, but the war itself may not be reversible." Outside the command centers, Allied spies and intelligence agents gathered information. They had begun piecing together the scope of the Wunderwaffe program. Captain Llewellyn said, "We are shocked at what we've uncovered. Entire cities, mountains and forests are filled with these weapons. We must act quickly." Underground, workers and scientists labored, fearful and exhausted. Explosions, accidents and shortages constantly threatened their work. Otto, wiping sweat from his brow, muttered, "Every failure shocks us, yet we continue. If we stop, the consequences are worse than any bomb or rocket." The first V2s reached London, leaving trails of fire and devastation. Civilians screamed, soldiers scrambled, and military analysts struggled to comprehend the new reality. Claire Sutton said, "They will be shocked not just by the destruction, but by the speed and precision of these weapons. This is a new kind of war." The Me-262s, though superior to Allied aircraft, were limited in number. Pilots faced inadequate training, mechanical failures, and Allied anti-aircraft fire. Flight Lieutenant Carter, exhausted after an engagement, radioed, "I am shocked at what we just faced. These jets are unlike anything in history. How do you stop them?" In the tunnels of Mittelwerk, von Braun and his assistants prepared for the next V2 launches. Each rocket represented months of labour, terror and ingenuity. Von Braun whispered, "We are creating marvels of science and instruments of death. The world will be shocked by both." By early 1945, the tide of the war had turned irrevocably against Germany. Despite Hitler's insistence that the Wunderwaffe would shock the Allies and secure victory, the relentless advance of Allied forces rendered many of these secret weapons moot. Underground tunnels were bombed, rocket launch sites destroyed, and the Reich's infrastructure crumbled under sustained attacks. In Mittelwerk, von Braun paced the cavernous tunnels, observing rockets partially destroyed by Allied bombing. Klaus approached nervously. "I am shocked at how fast everything is falling apart," he said. "All our work, for what?" Von Braun's face was grim. "We built marvels of science, but they could not change the war. We have shocked the world technically, but not strategically. Outside, Allied troops liberated towns and factories. Civilians emerged from hiding, shocked by the devastation of both bombings and the industrial complexes the Nazis had hidden." Captain James Llewellyn surveyed a captured facility. "The world will be shocked when they see the scale of what was hidden underground," he said. In Berlin, Hitler's temper had reached a boiling point. He refused to acknowledge the strategic collapse, insisting that new Wunderwaffe would shock the enemy and reverse the war. "We still have weapons they cannot imagine," he shouted during a meeting with generals. General Erhard, weary and disillusioned, replied cautiously, "Mein Führer, we are running out of time, men and materials. The Allies are advancing on every front." Hitler slammed his fist on the table. "You will be shocked by what we can still unleash. I will not accept defeat." Meanwhile, von Braun and Hornung worked under immense pressure to salvage jet fighters, rockets, and artillery. They attempted last-minute deployments, but Allied air superiority and damaged supply lines rendered many weapons ineffective. Erika, standing beside Hornung, whispered, "I am shocked that even our greatest inventions cannot stop what is coming." The first Me-262 jets entered combat in desperate, small-scale missions. Pilots flew with minimal training, often against overwhelming Allied numbers. Flight Lieutenant James Carter encountered several in the air. "I am shocked at how fast they move and how lethal they are," he radioed, "but there aren't enough to change anything." V-2 rockets continued to strike London and other cities, but the impact was largely psychological. While terrifying, they failed to alter the course of the war. Civilians and military planners adapted. MI6 officer Claire Sutton recorded reports, "We are shocked by the destruction, yes, but we are not broken. Their miracles are late, and their resources are exhausted." Underground, forced labourers and engineers worked frantically. Karl, one of the prisoners, muttered to a colleague, "I am shocked that we built these engines of terror, and now the people who sent us here are dying alongside us." By March 1945, Allied troops breached the Harz Mountains, seizing rocket facilities. Engineers, scientists, and officers attempted to flee. Von Braun, Hornung, and select teams escaped toward the American lines, hoping to surrender rather than face capture by the Soviets. Von Braun, addressing his team, said quietly, "We have shocked the world. Now let us survive it." Meanwhile, Hitler's inner circle began to collapse. Propaganda failed to mask defeats. Even within the bunker, aides whispered in shock. Otto, a staff officer, murmured, "I am shocked that the Führer still believes in these weapons, even as Berlin falls." The Wunderwaffe, for all its technological brilliance, could not stop the inevitable. The Allies dismantled production lines, captured remaining rockets, and documented the hidden weapons programs. Scientists were interrogated, their knowledge shocking the post-war world. The moral weight of the program weighed heavily on its creators. Von Braun, reflecting on his work, muttered to Klaus, "We have built marvels, but at a cost that shocks the conscience. Cities destroyed, thousands dead, all in the name of science and survival." Hornung, observing captured Me-262s, added, "We achieved technological miracles, but the world is shocked not by our genius, but by its misuse." Allied forces celebrated the liberation of Germany. Captain Llewellyn, surveying the ruined complexes, said, "We are shocked at the audacity of what they tried to build. Entire underground cities, rockets, jets. They pushed science to its limits, and humanity paid the price." In Berlin, Hitler remained isolated in his bunker, refusing to see reality. By April 1945, he was dead, leaving behind a legacy of terror, technological ambition, and a world that had been profoundly shocked by what the Nazis had dared to build. The secret weapons programs, though largely ineffective in altering the war's outcome, left a lasting mark. Engineers like von Braun would go on to work in space programs, while the world grappled with the moral and strategic implications of wartime innovation. The Allies, having seen the scale and potential of the Wunderwaffe, now understood that technological marvels alone could not win wars. Strategy, timing, and humanity were equally decisive. The world had been shocked, and history would remember both the terror and the ingenuity that emerged from the depths of Nazi Germany.